My brother-in-law moved into my house on a Tuesday. He left 61 days later, and he didn't say goodbye. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. My name is Stephanie, and I bought my house when I was 29 years old. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a little backyard with a wooden deck that needed repainting. I did the repainting myself. 2 weekends, 2 cans of bare cordovan brown from Home Depot, a borrowed roller from my neighbor. I remember being so proud of that deck. My husband Kyle took a photo of me standing on it with my arms out like I was on the bow of a ship. I used it as my lock screen for almost a year. The 3rd bedroom, the one that changed everything, I had set up as my home office. I work remotely as a UX designer, have for 5 years. My office had a standing desk, 2 monitors, a ring light for video calls, a small bookshelf, and a white noise machine because Kyle watches TV too loud and sound travels in older houses. I had a system. Client calls at 9 and 2. Deep work from 10 to noon. Everything organized. Everything intentional. I need you to understand that before any of this happened, my life felt very much under control. Kyle's younger brother, I'll call him my brother-in-law because that's what he is, had been going through a rough stretch. Divorce after 4 years of marriage. I won't say anything unkind about his ex-wife because I don't know the full story, and honestly it doesn't matter. What matters is that by March of last year, he was suddenly single. Suddenly without the apartment they'd shared in Columbus. And suddenly calling Kyle every other night. I liked my brother-in-law fine. He was the kind of guy who tells the same 3 funny stories at every family dinner, but tells them well enough that you don't really mind. He coached Little League on weekends. He brought good beer to cookouts. We weren't close in the way where I'd call him if I had a problem, but I didn't dread seeing him either. He was just there, part of the background of my marriage. So when Kyle sat down next to me on the couch one evening in late March, I already had a feeling about what was coming. He had that particular look he gets when he's about to ask me something he's already half decided. "What if Danny stayed here for a little while?" he said. "Just until he gets back on his feet." I asked what a little while meant. Kyle said maybe 3 weeks, maybe 4. Just enough time for Danny to find a place, save up first and last month's rent. He'd been crashing with a friend in Dayton, but the friend had a new girlfriend and it was getting complicated. 3 weeks. I remember repeating it back. 3 weeks. I said okay. I want to be really honest here. I did not say okay because I was a pushover. I said okay because I genuinely thought 3 weeks was manageable. I thought we'd help Danny get stable and then our lives would go back to normal. I thought this was what you did for family. Kyle's family had always been close in that way, holidays together, helping each other move, that kind of thing. I wanted to be the kind of wife who showed up for her husband's family. I wanted to be good at that. I cleared out my office, folded up the standing desk legs and slid it against the wall, moved my monitors to the dining room table, set up a little air mattress, and then Kyle said that wasn't right, so we bought Danny an actual bed frame and mattress from IKEA. $412. Kyle said we'd get it back eventually. I didn't push it. Danny arrived on a Friday with 2 duffel bags and a large dog named Biscuit. No one had mentioned the dog. Biscuit was a 90-pound Labrador something mix with the energy of a much younger, much smaller dog. He immediately discovered my couch, the one I'd bought myself before Kyle and I even got together. A pale grey linen sectional that I had saved up for and loved unreasonably. Within 48 hours, Biscuit had worked a small hole into the right side armrest. I watched it happen in real time and felt something shift in me quietly, like a floorboard settling wrong. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I told myself 3 weeks. The first week wasn't terrible. Danny was pleasant, a little sheepish the way people are when they know they're asking a lot. He made dinner one night, pasta with jarred sauce, garlic bread from a tube, and the 3 of us sat at the table, and it felt almost normal. Kyle was happy. I could see it in him having his brother there. They stayed up late watching basketball. I heard them laughing from our bedroom and I thought, okay, I can do this. The second week, the cracks started. Danny began sleeping until 11, sometimes noon. I was in the dining room trying to run client calls on my laptop with a ring light that was meant for a different room, and Biscuit kept walking behind me and appearing on camera. I had a call with a tech startup that was paying us $8,500 for a redesign, and their head of product asked, mid-meeting, "Is that a dog?" And I had to laugh it off and pretend it was charming. It was not charming. I was embarrassed in a very specific professional way that is hard to explain to someone who hasn't worked hard to be taken seriously in a field where people underestimate you. I brought it up to Kyle that night. Not dramatically. I said, "Hey, Biscuit's making my calls difficult. Could we figure something out?" Kyle said he talked to Danny about keeping the dog in the bedroom during work hours. That happened once. Week 3. Danny mentioned, casually, that he'd applied to a couple places, but the job market in our area was rough right now. Kyle nodded sympathetically. I asked what he was looking for. He said project management, maybe logistics. I asked if he'd considered anything in the meantime, like to bridge the gap. He said he didn't really want to do anything that felt like a step backward. I didn't say what I was thinking. What I was thinking was, you are living in my office, your dog destroyed my couch, and you don't want to feel like you're taking a step backward. The couch situation. I need to tell you about the couch. I went to get it repaired in week 3, and the upholstery shop told me the sectional style was discontinued, so they couldn't match the fabric exactly. They could do a close match, but the armrest would always look slightly different from the rest. The repair plus cleaning was going to be $830. I paid it. I didn't tell Kyle the full number right away. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment. There is never a right moment for that conversation, it turns out. Week 4 came and went. We were now past the original timeline. Kyle started talking about Danny the way you talk about weather, as if it was just a condition of our lives, not a temporary situation with an end date. Danny wants to try that new Thai place. And Danny's thinking about applying at the distribution center. And Danny's been doing better, don't you think? I did not think Danny had been doing better. I thought Danny had gotten very comfortable. I should tell you what our grocery bill looked like. Before Danny, we averaged about $450 a month for the two of us. Month 1 with Danny, $720. He ate a lot. Big portions, multiple snacks, the good stuff, name brand cereal, fancy lunch meat, those expensive sparkling waters in the variety pack. I want to be clear that I am not a stingy person. I have never once in my life counted someone else's groceries. But $720 is $720, and I was doing the math at the store, calculating as I shopped, and that is not a headspace I enjoy being in. The utilities ticked up too. An extra long shower is one thing, but Biscuit needed the AC running warmer in every room he wasn't in, apparently, and Danny had opinions about the thermostat. He liked it cool at night. Our electric bill for April was $60 higher than the previous April. I started keeping a note in my phone. Not for any particular reason, just because I am a person who processes things by writing them down. Hotel for $87 a night, so 30 nights would be $2,610. That was what I found myself thinking about on a Tuesday morning while I tried to take a client call in my own dining room with my laptop balanced on a stack of cookbooks because Danny had moved my monitor stand to plug in his gaming setup. My monitor stand. That he moved without asking. I said something to Kyle that night. I said, "This has gone past 4 weeks. We need to have an actual conversation about a real timeline." Kyle said he knew. He knew. He was going to talk to Danny. He looked tired. I softened. I said, "I love you and I know this is your brother, but I need to know there's an end in sight." Kyle talked to Danny. Danny said he was working on it. That was week 5. Week 6. Danny came home with new AirPods. The Pro ones. $249. I know because he showed them to Kyle in the living room, excited about the noise cancellation, and I stood in the doorway of the kitchen and thought something I am not proud of. I went back to my phone note, the number I had landed on, adding everything up carefully. Groceries overage, utilities overage, the couch repair, the IKEA bed we bought. 2 months of my work productivity being disrupted, which I estimated conservatively at maybe 3 missed billable hours a week, was somewhere around $4,000. I know that sounds like a lot. I want to be clear, I wasn't planning to hand anyone a bill. I was just processing, trying to understand what this situation had actually cost us. cost me. Week 7 was when Kyle said the thing. We were in the kitchen on a Sunday morning. Danny was still asleep. Biscuit was on my couch. I was drinking coffee and looking at my planner, and Kyle said, kind of lightly, I was thinking it would mean a lot to Danny if we just covered his expenses while he's here. Not forever, just until he lands something. I put down my coffee. I said, what do you mean by his expenses? Kyle said, you know, food, a little spending money, just so he doesn't feel stressed. I said, Kyle, we are already covering his food. We bought him a bed. My couch is destroyed. I'm working from the dining room table. And you want us to give him a spending allowance? Kyle said he didn't think I was being fair. He said Danny was going through something hard and this was what family does. I want you to understand that I did not yell. I am telling you this because I know how these stories go and I want to be accurate. I didn't yell. I went very quiet instead. I said, Kyle, I have not complained about one single thing for 7 weeks. I reorganized my entire work life. I lost a client call because your brother's dog walked across my camera. I paid $800 to repair a couch your brother's dog destroyed. And you are sitting here telling me I'm not being fair? Kyle said I was keeping score. I said, yes, I am, because someone has to. He left the kitchen. I heard him turn on the TV in the living room. Danny was still asleep. Biscuit was still on my couch. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. What I felt wasn't anger exactly. It was something colder than anger. It was the feeling of understanding something you'd been trying not to understand. I had a friend, someone I've known since college, sharp and practical in the way I aspire to be, and I called her that afternoon. I told her the whole thing. She listened without interrupting, which is something I love about her. When I finished, she said, Steph, at what point does helping someone become subsidizing them? I didn't have an answer, but I wrote the question in my phone. That week, I started making calls, not to be dramatic, just to understand my options. I called our county's housing resource line and asked hypothetically what the legal process looked like if someone had been living in a home for more than 30 days without a lease. In Ohio, anyone who has established residency even without a formal agreement has tenant rights, eviction proceedings, notice periods, 30-day minimum. I did not tell Kyle I made that call. I made another call to a moving company just to get a quote on what it would cost to move Danny's things to a storage unit if it came to that. I was not planning to do this. I just needed to know the number. $215 for a local move. I kept going to work. I kept making dinner. I kept being civil to Danny, who I genuinely believe did not understand the full picture of what was happening. He wasn't malicious, he was just comfortable. Comfortable people don't look for exits, they look for ways to get more comfortable. It was a Thursday when everything broke open, and it happened because of my niece. Danny's daughter, she's 8 years old, was visiting for the weekend. She's a sweet kid. Quiet, observant, the kind of child who watches adults more than she talks. She was sitting at the kitchen table on Friday evening while Kyle and Danny were watching TV, and I was making macaroni and cheese because she'd asked for it specifically, and she said to me, very matter-of-factly, Daddy said this is going to be his house now. I kept stirring the pot. I said, in the most neutral voice I have ever produced in my life, oh, he did. What did he say exactly? She said, he said we could have a room here. That Uncle Kyle would make it work. I served the macaroni and cheese. I smiled at her. I told her it smelled good, right? She said yes. I called her into the living room so Kyle and Danny could take over. Then I went to our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I stayed there for maybe 10 minutes. Then I walked out to the living room, and I asked Danny very calmly to tell his daughter he'd be right back, and I asked both of them to come to the kitchen. I want to be careful about how I tell this part. I wasn't cruel, I wasn't theatrical. I just said, I just had a conversation with your daughter that I think we all need to talk about. I told them what she'd said. I watched Danny's face go through about 4 different expressions in 2 seconds. I watched Kyle go very still. Danny said, she misunderstood. I said, she's 8. She told me what you told her in her exact words. So let's talk about what you actually told her. There was a long silence. Kyle looked at his brother. Not at me. At his brother. Danny said, "Look, I just meant I was hoping maybe we could figure something out longer term. I thought if we talked about it," I said, "there's nothing to figure out. This was supposed to be 3 weeks. It has been almost 2 months. I need a move-out date, a real one. In writing, if that's what it takes." Danny looked at Kyle. Kyle opened his mouth. I looked at Kyle too. I held his gaze for a long moment. I want to believe he saw something in my face, something specific, because what happened next was not what I expected. Kyle said, "Danny, she's right. We need a date." Danny left 3 weeks later. He found a room in a shared house in Westerville. 2 other guys split utilities. Not his first choice, I'm sure, but a choice that existed the entire time he was living in my office. The night after he moved out, I moved my desk back, plugged in my monitors, put a white noise machine back in its corner, stood in the middle of that room for a second, and just breathed. Kyle and I talked for a long time that week. Not a fight, more like an accounting. He admitted he'd been avoiding the problem because dealing with his brother felt like something he should be able to handle himself, internally, without it becoming a household issue. I told him I understood that impulse, but that it stopped being internal the moment it moved into our home. He agreed. We're fine. Better than fine, actually. I think the whole thing made us more honest with each other than we'd been in a while. The dog scratches on the hallway floor are still there. I look at them sometimes. Here's what I know now, that I wish someone had told me before. The moment someone moves into your home, the clock starts. Not for them. For you. Because the longer you wait to have the hard conversation, the more leverage you lose. Not legally, not financially, but emotionally. Every day that passes makes it easier for the other person to believe this is normal, and harder for you to believe you have the right to say it isn't. You have the right. You don't have to earn it. It came with your name on the deed. I have a standing desk and a ring light and a white noise machine and a door that closes. My next client call is Monday at 9. My couch looks a little different on one armrest, but I've stopped really noticing. Your sweat is in the walls. Don't let anyone make you forget that. I've thought a lot about why I waited so long. It wasn't weakness, exactly. I think it was something more complicated than that. A kind of moral confusion that happens when kindness, self-respect start pulling in opposite directions. I told myself I was being generous. I told myself this was what family looked like. But somewhere around week 5, standing in my own dining room trying to run a professional client call with a 90-pound dog wandering behind me on camera, I realized that what I was actually doing was slowly convincing myself that my own comfort didn't matter. That's the thing nobody tells you. Generosity has a shape. And when you keep reshaping yourself to fit someone else's needs without any acknowledgement, any reciprocity, any awareness, it stops being generosity. It becomes something else. It becomes erasure. Danny wasn't a bad person. I want to be clear about that still. But there is a particular kind of damage that comfortable people do without meaning to. They settle. They expand. They fill the space they're given and then quietly start eyeing the space they haven't been given yet. He told his 8-year-old daughter that my house might become his house. He said that out loud to a child, which means he had thought it enough times that it felt like a reasonable thing to say. That doesn't happen in week 1. That's what 61 days of no pushback builds. And I have to be honest with myself about my part in that. Every week I said nothing. I was teaching him that silence meant yes. Every time I moved my equipment without saying anything. Every time I absorbed the grocery bill without mentioning it. Every time I watched Kyle make excuses and chose not to push, I was building the conditions for what happened. Not because I was weak, but because I was trying to be good in a way that had no limits. And goodness without limits is just available. It's just something people take. What changed me wasn't anger. It was that little girl sitting at my kitchen table telling me casually what her father had told her in the simple, honest way that children report the world back to you. She didn't know she was handing me something. She thought she was just talking, but I heard it as clearly as anything I've ever heard. This will not stop unless you stop it. So I did. And Kyle. I've thought about him too. He chose his brother for a long time because choosing his brother felt easier than choosing conflict. That's not unique to him. Most of us have done some version of that. But when the moment came, when I looked at him in that kitchen and he saw in my face what I wasn't saying out loud, he made the right call. That mattered. It still matters. A marriage isn't just about the times you get it right. It's also about what you do when you finally see that you got it wrong. The scratch marks from Biscuit are still in my hallway floor. I've decided not to fill them in. Not as punishment, not as a reminder to be bitter, just as a record. Something happened here. I handled it. I'm still standing in this house with my name on the deed and my monitors back on my desk and my door that closes. That's enough. That has always been enough.